Hi, everybody. Sid Walker here. Welcome to our presentation today, which is a preview, really, from my sales training and coaching program for relationship-oriented financial advisors and sales consultants of all kinds. My program's titled Selling Without Wrestling in general. And today we're adding a subtitle to it, which is Selling Without Wrestling, How to Master the Low-Key Approach. And what you'll learn today is how to shift from being perceived as a salesperson to a trusted advisor, how to have a high closing ratio by connecting with prospective clients and helping them figure out what they want, powerful and reliable ways to double your closing ratio without ever being pushy or controlling, how to make the low-key approach work in all scenarios, in-person, telephone, video calls, whatever you're doing. All right, and let me check right now. Can everybody hear me? And can everybody see my slide there? I did a webinar last month, and first time I've done hundreds of webinars. I had no slides. It's pretty, as somebody said, all I can see is you, no offense. So anyway, somebody can let me know you can hear me okay there, and that you can see the slides. That would be great. So make sure I got my, just find your, go on and do it on the question box there. All right. So how to get the most out of today. Let me see if I can go to a slide here. There we go. Oh yeah, great. Thanks, Thomas. So keep an open mind. I'm definitely a little different than what you're used to hearing. You'll find out as we're going today. I've been a kind of a personal growth junkie, and I don't know. I've been doing research forever. I've been coaching for over 35 years. I just stumbled into that early in my life, way ahead of anybody else, probably 15 years ahead of anybody. I got certified to coach when I was in about 1980, so it's been a while. And so I've got a proven knack for helping some of the most gentle, soft-spoken people become highly successful in sales and in particular financial services, although worked with lots of different kinds of people. So there's no more thinking you need to be pushy or controlling to, really do well. And as I was saying, I've worked with all kinds of occupations. I started out working with Fortune 500 executives. I had Fortune 500 clients before I was 30. I had a more senior partner who was a psychologist. That helped. But that was doing corporate outplacement. Then that led to some executive coaching. And then probably a few years into that, I decided just to focus on the financial services because I'd started out there in the life insurance business right out of college. And I just liked that group better than the corporate world as much. So, and then I like sales, so I still coach some executives, but most of them are trying to sell something. So I like the sales aspect. And then the financial services business, I'm up over 3,900 advisors, I think, that I've coached in my career. And I've created some of the biggest people and some of the biggest producers in the business, or helped create them anyway. So what I'm going to talk about today is highly proven with thousands of people. And I personally use everything we're going to talk about today as well. So there's no theory, or good ideas here today. This is all hardcore stuff that works, So, and everything I talk about is highly tested, highly proven. Even some of the more abstract things are even proven. There's a guy named David Hawkins who's been writing amazing books. He passed away a few years ago, but if any of you have ever read any of his stuff, amazing author, and pretty much has taken anything more abstract and proven what makes it work. So as one guy called me up one time, read my Call Reluctance book. He was a movie producer in New York, and called me up and said he loved my book, and that he was trying to raise $35 million for a movie that he wanted to do, and he wanted to get it from one investor. And anyway, we started talking, and he mentioned that I'd made the comment in one of my books that I said nothing in this book has been proven scientifically, because that was the only negative comment I've ever gotten on that book. Was somebody said some of the stuff Walker's saying is not scientifically proven. Well, this guy pointed out to me, he said, there isn't anything that you're talking about in any of your books that isn't scientifically proven. So I thought that was pretty neat. So, because I don't have to do it. I've never had an interest in scientifically proving anything, but I'm thrilled to find out that there's a guy who's done it. So that's David Hawkins, MD, PhD, at a spiritual institute of something. If anybody wants that, more information, send me an email. Happy to get it to you. All right. So our purpose today, I'm going to teach you as much as I can on how to master the low-key approach. Give you the big pieces, obviously, and I'm going to give you some resources. Talk about individual coaching a little bit. I'll do that later. I've got 6 books on Amazon. One of those is the number 1 selling book on overcoming call reluctance and increasing your prospecting. And then I've got a huge free website, which I'll make sure everybody knows how to get on. It's called Selling Without Wrestling. There's over 100 hours of audio on there, hundreds of pages of handouts for, I've been doing this a long time, so there's a lot of information. And I used to charge $50 a month for it, and made it free a couple of years ago with donations. And I get some donations. I just tell people, if you get value from it, send me some money. People actually send me money, so it's been great. But I just got tired of doing the membership thing. A lot of moving parts, and so it's worked out well. I've got a lot of people that use it. Love that. A lot of people that love that website, so check it out. It's probably the most comprehensive website on the low-key approach on the internet. All right, and then I've got handouts. Be sure to download those. If you forget, send me an email and I'll send them to you. But I gave you a free copy, a PDF copy of my newest book called Living in the Zone, and a couple other things you're going to want. My opening language, and some other questions that I like to use that are related to today. So find that spot where you can download the handouts. There'll be 4 items there. All right, logistically, we'll shoot for, I usually end exactly in an hour. I'm good at that. So it'll be mostly content, probably 95%. I spend a little time on coaching at the end, but this is not an infomercial. This is more teaching. My style is to give people as much information as possible. I'm not an interactive presenter, so I like interactive presentations. This isn't one of them. So I'm just going to give you lots of stuff today, and then you can ask questions as we go. I'll get to them if I can. If you don't get your question answered, call me, email me. I don't like reading or writing long emails, so don't hesitate to call me. I'm very, very available, and I can easily call you back. So I'm on the phone all the time. I love to talk on the phone. So, and then if you don't hear me, let me know. Only one time in my many years of doing this sort of thing, then I went 5 minutes before I'd muted myself accidentally. It went about 5 minutes before somebody said, "Can't hear you." So don't let that happen. All right, and everybody can see my slides. As far as I'm looking at them, it says that what you're seeing is, I can see my slides here. So I think we're okay there. Let me know if that happens. All right, any technical issues? Log out, log back in. If I get disconnected, that's never happened before, which means it could. Sometime on a VoIP line, you're on the phone. Which probably won't affect what you're seeing on your screen, but it may affect the phone. So anyway, if we just get disconnected, just be patient. I'll be back. I'll get back on the webinar. All right. So let's try another slide here. So 2 basic approaches to selling. I've been talking about this for almost a couple decades, but I haven't heard anybody else say it quite this way. But to me, there's 2 very clear groups. You've got the client controllers, which is the traditional approach. That's the main essence of sales, the way it's taught from the original perspective or traditional approach is your job is to make a sale, period. And you want to control your client basically, into a corner that they can't get out of. So, and that's still going on out there, as you know. So you do whatever it takes, to make a sale. And if you don't make a sale, you've failed. That's okay. If that's, if that's something that you enjoy doing, that's okay. I'm not trying to convert people away from that approach. I'm looking for the relationship builders, which is a very different group. because you don't want to be pushy. You don't want to be aggressive or controlling. You don't want to make people uncomfortable. You don't like conflict. You want to get along. You want to make friends. You don't want to wrestle. Selling without wrestling. You want to connect with people, have good communication, exchange of ideas. Basically, help the client get what they want. What do they want? Not what do you want to sell them. So, and I assume everybody on this call is a relationship builder. I don't attract the client controllers too much. I'm too soft, too soft for those guys. So, although I'll say I have fun with them sometimes. I used to speak a lot, and I would say, I could tell I'd be like at a break or something. There'd be a bunch of client controller, usually younger guys, over talking to each other, and I'd say, I could help you guys double your income. They go, how are you going to do that? And I go, well, I can tell you, but you're not going to like it. And they'd say, well, all right, tell us. And I'd say, well, okay, so here it is. You got to stop controlling your clients. Oh, we're not going to do that. So there's some people that don't have an option other than controlling people. So that's okay. Everybody's got to make a living somehow, right? But if you're not a client controller, you're a relationship builder. The rules are really different, and that's one of the things I'm talking about today. Is that, and I'll get to that a little more in a second. Here's, what the cause of basically being indoctrinated into a traditional sales kind of environment that causes all kinds of problems if you're a relationship builder. But so for right now, I've got on here, why is pushy and controlling style so dominant? This is an interesting, the average corporation, they don't care how you make the sale. They just want you to do it. They want the numbers. They're bottom line oriented. That's why the training is never really that good in most corporations. They teach you really well about all the products. They're good at that. But in terms of selling style, it's usually pretty basic. And pitch and close. Go out and talk people into stuff. Most people don't have any other options in a corporate environment. And so I'm going to give you a little bit of a historical perspective, which is also, I'm basically a peak performance coach. That's what I've been doing in my career. I'm a peak performance sales coach. So I'm really good at getting any kind of barriers out of the way related to selling or self-promotion, or prospecting is the big one. But I'm really good at all that stuff from a psychological standpoint. And so let me give you some of my latest research, which I've had amazing breakthroughs in recent years, helping people get through all kinds of barriers. So and part of it is the ego. It's understanding the ego. Most people have no clue what the ego really is. We all have this sense. It's a sense of self-esteem or self-worth, and that's true. But that's about 1%. One of what the ego actually does. It's the source of all negativity, and it's the source of all suffering. It is not your friend. It is a nasty piece of work, and most people have no idea that's what the ego is up to. It's brilliant at what it does. It disguises itself really well. I'll give you some more ideas, but when I started this, I always wondered, why is the analytical mind so powerful? In terms of slowing me down or stopping me. And I finally realized there's nothing wrong with your analytical mind. It's a great tool. The problem's the ego combined with your analytical mind, because your ego has got a whole different agenda. So here's how it gets created. Basically, we're all born intuitive beings. We have all the information we need to do whatever we came to do in life through our intuition. Which again, you don't hear that a lot. But to me, that's the way it works. In 40 years of doing research and coaching thousands of people, we come in with massive amounts of knowledge, and there's explanations for that. I won't get into it today, just to watch our time here. But that information is basically available through our intuition, not through our intellect. So as a child, then here we are being these intuitive beings, and then along come the parents that decide that the honeymoon's over here and it's time for you to behave. So now you've got to conform, and so what happens is, as a child, we end up developing this new being or new self called it's not a being actually, it's a new self called the ego, because the ego's job is to survive around the adults and basically learn to conform, like to society, for example. Because it's really a false self. It's not who we really are, but it's one we develop in order to survive, because that's the ego's goal. It's survival at any cost. It's not It's really to control, dominate, manipulate, do whatever you have to do in order to survive. That's its number one goal. And so that's the other self that gets created. So now intuition looks like, who cares? You're going to trust that source? That's a total unknown. Or are you going to go, I have some guys tell me sometimes, yeah, this sounds great, Sid, but I live in the real world. What that means is they're a giant ego. They're listening to their ego all the time, trying to figure everything out, try to control everything. That's okay. But as I like to say, your ego combined with your intellect is the slowest, dumbest part of your brain. Really. And most of us are using that all the time for everything. Occasionally we get intuitive, and then we see miracles happen, and then we go, oh no, we don't do that again. That was too scary, or that was too out of control. There's a good tennis story. I'll see if I'll tell. I think I'll write that down. That's the punchline. It was just too out of control. If I have time, I'll tell that towards the end. So basically, what happens is then you've got the two approaches to life. One you're born with, which is the intuitive approach. So don't ever think you're not intuitive. Everybody is. Now it's different. My ex-wife was brilliant. She could walk into a room and pretty much look at anybody and tell you what's going on with those people. I can't do that. But if you park a truck in front of your house and you're moving, I can tell you whether your furniture is going to fit in the truck or not in about 2 seconds. Okay, that's more guy intuition, So women tend to be better with people. Guys tend to be better with things. But I got lots of guy clients that are really good with people. So, and I think I am too, actually. So you can develop skills in both areas for sure. But kind of naturally, the way we're socialized, guys tend to be more thing oriented, sports oriented. Women tend to be better with the intuitive with people. So those are the two approaches: intuition and then the ego. So the ego is basically, again, it focuses on survival and control, and then it doesn't trust unknown sources. So your intuition's not even an option to your ego. That's nuts. Why would you trust that? That's an unknown source. All right. So interestingly, then, most people follow the ego. And your ego is so good, it makes you think you have your own. It makes you think that's who you are. And you're not. You are not your ego. You're basically the chooser. You can choose to be an ego or an intuitive spirit. You don't have to be an ego at all. And that's a lot of what I coach people on today. I basically teach them how not to be an ego. Yeah, I laugh because I wrote a book on that, which I gave you. It's called Living in the Zone. And it's really a book about how not to be an ego. And when I kind of had a short moment of panic at one point when I was writing the book, I'm going, oh, I'm writing a book on how not to be an ego, and I'm going to sell that to egos, because that's most people. So fortunately, there's a lot of people that realize what I'm saying is true, and they're interested in finding out how to expand their horizon away from just the ego reality. So most people choose the ego reality because it creates the illusion of more control, more safety, but it lacks tremendous intelligence. Your intuition is thousands of times smarter than your intellect combined with your ego. But again, and your ego has also got tons of misinformation. If you ask 5 people to describe a car accident, you get 5 different descriptions. That's the kind of information your ego has. Whereas your intuition has the databases are extremely different. Your ego's got a tiny little database of experience, and whereas your intuition is really beyond comprehension. There's so much information in there. Again, there's a scientific explanation for that, but I don't want to get into that right now. All right, and then the other part that makes it tricky and really makes a lot of people choose the ego reality over the intuitive reality is that it requires a leap of faith to be intuitive. Because you don't get your intuition just gives you an answer. Go left, go right, say this, say that. It doesn't give you the paperwork, which your ego hates. Your ego wants to control everything. Your ego wants to know what's going to happen before it happens. I could give you lots of. I played a lot of tennis. If you play tennis, you get to see your ego and how powerful it is all the time, because it wants to see where that ball's going before you hit it. Almost. I had a pro one time I used to play a lot with that said, Walker, you can have a great serve, but he said you don't get to see it. And what he meant was, if I look even 1 millionth of a second, if I just peek to see if that ball went in when I hit it, is going to hit the top of the net. I can hit the tape on the tennis net 20 times in a row. And he'd say, you're looking. I'm going, no, I'm not. He said, the ball's going in if you don't look. It's really that powerful. Your intuition knows exactly where that ball needs to be hit. And if you let your intuition take over, you can do anything extremely well. But again, it requires a leap of faith, and that scares a lot of people. That seems that's like, oh my God, am I going to trust my whatever I'm doing to my intuition, which to your ego has an unknown source. Maybe who knows where it's coming from. All right. So we could spend a lot more time on this, but all this stuff is thousands of years old. There's nothing new here. I mean, I've studied a lot. I actually spent 10 years as a lay monk in a monastery. Lay monk means I lived across the street, but I spent all my free time. It was in a monastery in Southern California run by women. How's that? And I learned a lot doing that. One of the best times of my life. And it was a very advanced program on intuition, basically. But we did a lot of reading. We studied a lot of different religions, and of course, Christianity is a part of that. But one of the things you realize is there's nothing new. The Hindu Bible, the Bhagavad Gita, has been talking about. I mean, the book is about the war in your head between your ego and your intuitive spirit. That's 5,000 years old. The I Ching, the book of philosophy, the Chinese book of philosophy, which I love. I've been reading that for decades, off and on. I mean, it talks about all the same stuff. Whether you're going to go with the truth of what feels intuitively right, or whether you're going to listen to your ego, which they call, the inferior part of your mind. So this stuff's been going on a long time, like thousands of years. All right. So I say there's nothing new. What's new is how much we've forgotten about what works. That's what's new. All right. So that's part of my job, is to get people back in touch with a lot of things that they intuitively know. Because I say to people, that's a big theme of mine. Don't do anything if it doesn't feel right. Or when you're using your intuition, it's so simple. What feels right, you move toward what feels right, and you move away from what doesn't. You don't have to think about anything. It's quick. So it saves you a lot of time. Whereas your ego, oh, no, dear, we've got to figure everything out. We've got to spend hours and days and months and years figuring everything out before we're going to take any risks. You see the difference? It's huge in terms of how much you can get done in a day. If you just trust your intuitive instincts, you can do 10 times more than you usually do. And you'll be in the right place at the right time. You'll say the right thing at the right time. But again, it requires a leap of faith. It requires trust in that part of your brain. So it's that's the challenge. But I've been teaching that for a long time. And one of the things that I've done is I've kept a log, actually, of every time I've trusted my intuitive instincts and what happened. That's a powerful thing to do, because if you don't keep a log of those kinds of experiences, your ego erases that. It can't erase it totally, but it tries to get you to forget about the times you've trusted your intuition, because your ego wants to be the source of all your choices, not your intuition. That's an unknown source. All right. So the rules are different. If you're a relationship builder, you're going to do way better with a more intuitive approach. And your ego is going to want to push for the sale. To me, the low-key approach, which is intuitive, is you're basically helping people figure out what feels intuitively right to them. It's not about trying to sell them a product. It's helping them figure out what do they want to do. You got to teach them. It's a combination of teaching and interview. You got to teach them what the options are. But you want them to decide what feels right to them. And that's going to work in ways that you never would have imagined. I mean, my average client's got a 90% closing ratio. Some people say, oh, that's impossible, or that's too high, without using any sales technique whatsoever. I'm going to talk a little bit more about, it's not man on the street 90%. There's some conditions. We'll get to that in a few minutes. But literally, and the financial incentive that's the financial incentive to learn the low-key approach, is that you're going to double or triple your closing ratio. Again, it's really different. The rules are different, but it's where if you're being a client controller, you never get above 30%. I mean, you can talk people into stuff, but 30% of them kind of want it anyway. I used to make that joke when I would speak a lot. I'd say, 30% of the people are going to buy in the insurance business. I don't know if it's the same on the investment side, but probably similar, are going to buy no matter what you do, because they know they need to do something. So or how much the rep gets in the way, or the advisor gets in the way. So whereas once you get over 30%, people start giving things back. They'll buy something just to get you out of the office or get you out of their house. So anyway, so there's a huge financial incentive to really learn this low-key approach, and because a lot of people have kind of a combination, and that's really my next slide. A lot of people have a lot of bad habits from the traditional approach. So you're doing things that don't match your values, and of course, what ends up happening is you're operating way below your potential. You've got typically maybe you don't have enough prospects, or you've got prospects but you may not be calling them. Probably not getting enough referrals. Referrals is a great example of the client controller approach. Is demand referrals or expect referrals. Go out and push people to get them. If you're a relationship builder, there's no way you're going to do that. There's no way you're going to put your client under that kind of pressure. So a lot of times what relationship builders, they've been trained to be aggressive about, they just give up and just say, I can't do that. So I have a webinar on that's on the website. I just updated it several months ago with all my latest and greatest stuff. It's called How to Get Your Clients to Give You Hundreds of Referrals. So check that out. It's on WebEx. It's also on Selling Without Wrestling. But anyway, you've got some negative issues here that are caused by your combination of, because you've got some traditional habits in there about how you think about sales, and some of you've kind of discovered some relationship-oriented things on your own, but basically that creates a lack of money, that creates a lack of sales, and of course, we've all got things we want, vacations, maybe we wanted to take a vacation or somewhere we want to go, and that's harder to do if the money seems to be taken pretty quickly for all kinds of things. Maybe you want to drive a nicer car, or maybe you want a bigger house, or maybe it's putting money away for kids' education, or putting money away for yourself for later. Or I know people talk about wanting to give back, give money back, or give money to a cause that you believe in. I mean, there's just lots of things that we could do with extra money. So, and I think typically. It ends up when we're not making the money we want to make. We feel like we're not living up to our potential, or we're not making as much money as we know we can. If we had the right approach to get in front of the right people, and with the right approach, that we'd be able to do a lot more. So that's what I'm focused on here today. In particular, is I'm going to share some ideas with you, and then decide if they feel right, and if they do, use them. They work. Because you've all tried all kinds of things. I've done the same thing with my business. I mean, I've done everything you can imagine, from a marketing standpoint. I mean, I've tried lots of stuff and, spent tens of thousands of dollars on things. And to me, there's only one thing that works, big picture, and that is to trust your intuitive instincts in terms of deciding what you're going to do or what you're going to get involved in. I mean, that's the only thing that's consistently worked for me. And I've tried everything you can imagine in terms of, I call it chasing the next good idea. Okay. You only chase the next good idea if it feels intuitively right. If you don't get that feeling, don't do it. It won't work. You might, you break even or something, but it won't be profitable. I guess that's the part. I've broken even on a lot of programs, but that's kind of boring. So, all right. All right. So how do we change the rules? So here we've got change your intent. This is kind of rule change number one. So I'm going to give you like 3 basic paradigm shifts, we could call them, or rule changes that are really important. One is you change your intent away from trying to make a sale to helping the client make an educated decision that feels right to him or her or them, which includes doing nothing, by the way. Client controller cannot say that, because if they don't make a sale, they failed. Whereas you don't need to make a sale to succeed. If you've helped somebody figure out exactly what they want to do, and what it is not to do anything at the moment, that's a success. You're not going to make any money today on that one, but that doesn't mean you won't down the road. So it's a very different paradigm. I guess I'm saying, but you're still going to make sales. The goal is still to make sales, but you do it very differently, and that takes a little rewiring, a little Because the other part of it is you want to take away all the sales pressure. I mean, a lot of times I talk about what I'm teaching people to do is how to become a trusted advisor rather than be a salesperson. You want to take away all sales pressure or anything related to sales technique. You don't need any of it. It's a waste of time. If you're a relationship oriented person, it hurts the relationship too much. People don't expect it, especially after I'll give you some language today. After you tell them you're not going to do that, you can't do it. Because people basically are looking for three things. They want information about what's of interest to them. They want to feel heard and feel understood. That's huge. That's probably the most important thing, that people feel heard and understood. And they don't want sales pressure. Everybody hates it. So why not give people those things? Especially if you're a relationship builder, it just changes your whole job. Literally, you have a new job when you make some of these changes. Because the thing is, if you push people, you lose 70% of them. Really. Whereas if you're not pushing people and you're helping people figure out what they want to do and you're creating a solution together, you can easily have. I had a guy, one of my longtime clients in Seattle. I have a lot of clients in Seattle. Was on one of my calls. It's actually on the website. It's called How Producers Make Millions with the Low-Key Approach. I had 4 of my clients on there. This was years ago. A great webinar. And anyway, one of the guys on there, his name's Dave. He's a funny guy. He said I've been working with Walker for 10 years. He said I did a double take the other day. He said somebody actually said no to me. So that's the first no I've heard in 10 years. Now, again, that sounds outrageous, but if you're helping people figure out what they really want to do, what's the objection? Why wouldn't they do it? There aren't very many. I don't do anything on objections. If you're getting objections, you're doing something wrong. How's that? How's that for a different approach here? All right. So what else we got? So I gave you the 3 things. All right. So you're changing your intent away from trying to make a sale to helping the client make a decision that feels right to them. All right, rule number 2, demonstrate you're on their side. I gave you my opening language, so you don't need to write this down. I'm not going to show you a slide of it. I'm just going to do it verbally, but be sure to download that if you like it. So basically what it is sometimes I'll get people to say, I'm bringing different values to the table. I feel like my main job here is to help you make educated decisions that feel right to you. This is not about me trying to talk you into buying something so you can relax. I mean, people physically relax when you say that. But obviously I've got lots of things, lots of products you can buy, but that's not a requirement for you and I to be friends and for me to help you. And one other thing, if what feels right is not to do anything, that's a viable option. Okay, so you've got that as well. And one other thing that's important to me is, if anything we're doing doesn't feel right to you, we're not doing it. Period. You've got total veto power over whatever we're going to do here. So you're giving total control to the client. They love it. One of my favorite stories. I did a webinar one time. I talked for 2 or 3 hours with an agency one time, and I had a guy call me later that night at my hotel as I was taking questions or talking to people, and he said I did an interview after the seminar today, and he said it was just amazing. He said I used your stuff, and he said it was a younger couple, and he said I did the opening and the opening language, and she said the woman sat back in her chair and said, "Wow, we've been praying for somebody like you." You can't do better than that. In other words, to start out an interview. So it's powerful, to give people total control. Tell them, you're on their side. Let's do this together. This is not about me trying to sell you a product. Because sometimes people say, I'm not here to sell you a product, because that's not really true. I always tell people, be careful how you say that. It's more, you're here to help people make an educated decision that feels right to them. If they end up wanting to buy something, that's totally okay. I mean, that sounds so obvious, it's hilarious, but at the same time, sometimes I have to remind people that, because everybody kind of wants to say that same thing. I'm not here to sell you something. It's not really true. You do want that to happen, ideally, but you don't fail if you don't make a sale. That's the big difference. All right. So try that language. And again, I gave it to you in the handout there. And if you somehow don't get the handouts, just send me an email. I'll get them to you. But that's, again, I've been doing this for over 35 years. Everybody loves that language. All right. How are we doing here? All right. And then here's the third one. The big rule change, and this I've been kind of alluding to this. I say that I have my average client's got a 90%. Did I finish my story on Dave, or did I get off on that? I don't think I finished that story. I was talking about the guy in Seattle, and anyway, at one point he said, "Oh, I did." Yeah, that he had gotten to know in 10 years. All right, I just want to make sure I didn't miss that. Okay, because that sounds like 90% sounds high. Or a guy saying, I haven't had anybody say no to me in years, but that really is how it can be. I have clients that sometimes I'll go months at a time and not miss anybody because again, they're trying to help people figure out what they really want to do. All right. So chemistry, timing, and money. Came up with the chemistry and timing formula years ago. Then I added money to it. Basically, chemistry means you like each other. Timing means there's a current need for something you're offering. Money means they've got money to buy the solution. So to me, you've got to have those three things in order to get the 90%. It's not 90% a man on the street. So chemistry, timing, and money. And then I've had people tell me that was a huge thing they got from my coaching was, and I've got some big producers as clients that have fired big clients just because the chemistry was not there. They were the nightmare client. I have probably hundreds of clients that would say, if the chemistry is not there, do not take them as a client, no matter how much money they've got. Really, because those are going to be the nightmare clients. Everything's going to go wrong with their account. Everything's going to break. They're going to be yelling and screaming at you and telling you what a lousy job you're doing. I can tell you lots of stories. So chemistry is a big deal. And again, if you meet people and the chemistry is there, maybe they don't have a lot of money to invest or whatever you're presenting, insurance and investments, and it doesn't mean they won't have money. So you want to collect the people you have chemistry with, because some of them are going to end up with money, and then you want them to be thinking of you. You want them to go, yeah, I remember that guy. Let's call him. And of course, the other question is, I like to ask people, if you're a relationship builder, are you making sales without the chemistry? No. So why would you waste your time? I mean, yeah, you can go back in traditional sales and talk people into stuff, but now you're opening a can of worms for all kinds of negativity. You don't need it. You'll make lots more money if you stop trying to talk people into stuff and just help them get what they want. Which again, you don't hear a lot of people say that, but to me, that's the reality. That's the truth. My average client is closing way more than any client controller. And I've taken a lot of people. I mean, I've had clients for over 20 years. I could name a bunch that went from $50,000 over $1 million of income. It might have taken them 5 years, 10 years to do it, but they're there today, make a lot of money. I've helped 3 or 4 people. I think I'm up to 4 where I've helped them double their incomes 4 times. Okay, they're making a lot of money. Not because I'm a financial genius by any means. That's not my thing. I'm really good at the psychology of this stuff. I was talking to somebody today about that before my webinar, that, when I look back at my years of coaching, the number one thing that's caused people to go double and triple their income or whatever it is always intuition. Being more intuitive is the greatest skill that you can learn. And there's really 2 parts to it, because in order to be more intuitive, you also have to ignore your ego. You've got to learn to ignore all the negative thoughts and feelings coming from your ego in order to hear your intuition. Sometimes it'll pop through. If it's a dangerous situation, your intuition gets louder, but it's a very subtle voice, very quiet voice. In fact, it's one of my favorite definitions is internal promptings barely caught in the web of human consciousness. Okay, how's that for subtle? Internal promptings barely caught in the human web and consciousness. Gandhi called it the still small voice. Another one of my favorites is the barely audible voice of heaven. How's that? So barely audible means, it's subtle. So you got to quiet down that noisy ego in order to even hear it. Some people meditate, some people do exercise. When you're driving down the road, the key to getting your intuition going, we'll talk more about this before we wind up here today, is to ask it questions. It's that simple. You engage your intuition by simply asking a question. What feels right here? Does this feel right? Or what do you want to accomplish? One of my favorite questions is, what's the best use of my time and energy at this point in my career? And then you wait for an answer. You don't try to figure it out. That's the difference. Your ego wants to figure everything out with linear logic. When you ask your intuition questions, it's kind of like prayer. When you ask God for help, you don't try to figure out the answer. You wait for the answer. Okay, so your intuition is the same thing. You're asking a question of the smartest part of your brain, which has access to all kinds of things you're not even aware of. Or as I like to say, your ego combined with your intellect only sees straight ahead. Your intuition sees 360 degrees. It can see things you cannot see. And of course, that's the challenge. You're going to get some answers about what to do intuitively that your ego is going to go, you're not going to do that, are you? I could give you lots of stories of that as well. But that's because your ego, I tell people when I'm talking about with coaching, I just say, your ego is never going to want to hire a coach. That's a total unknown. But your intuitive spirit might go, absolutely, this feels right. I need some help. So I tell people, trust your intuition, not your ego. Because your ego wants to keep everything the same, including your bad habits. If you got bad habits, the reason it's so hard to change them is your ego doesn't want you to change anything. And because it's a life or death matter for you to stay exactly where you are. Anything that you're doing that your ego has seen that you're still alive, that's okay. We'll keep doing that. You ever wondered why change is so hard? That's the reason. You got a major part of your brain that most people are listening to that's dedicated to no change, no risk. Or as what I like to say, your ego wants to be rich with no effort and constantly entertained. Sound familiar? It's an amazing piece of work, and it's the source of all negativity and all suffering. Ooh, yuck. So I tell people, just stop listening to your ego, and your life will change. Just stop listening to your negativity. It's all smoke and mirrors. You can totally ignore it. I can tell you a story. I mean, when I was younger, I remember I used to keep track of everything I did wrong in order to not do it again. It took me a while. I finally started to realize that's not a good vision, to keep track of everything you did wrong. That's the wrong vision. You're more likely to do more than what you did wrong. You got to focus on what you want to create. Anyway. All right. So I gave you the chemistry and timing formula, and again, I've had people tell me that was a turning point in their career. Do not take on clients that you don't have chemistry with, because that's what also gets you up to over the 90% closing ratio. If you and the client like each other, good things are going to happen. And you're helping them figure out what they want to do. All right. We're doing good time-wise here. Oh, here's rule number 4. I forgot I had 4. So get more commitment. This is a big one. I mean, I wrote a book on this called How to Double Your Sales by Asking a Few More Questions. I'll tell you more about that in a minute. But asking questions is such a huge. I mean, I started out in the life insurance business. I was about a 25% closing ratio. I met a guy who had been with Dale Carnegie for many years, taught me how to ask questions and stop talking. My closing ratio went to 85% overnight. Like within 2 weeks, I learned this questioning track, which is I still teach it today, 40 years later. But it's really powerful to ask more questions, and that's my book, How to Double Your Sales by Asking a Few More Questions. I've sold over $1 million of that book, mostly back of the room sales, but it's about how to get to the feeling level in the interview by asking more questions. So it's a huge thing. One of my favorite questions is, I'm doing all the talking. Tell me what you're hearing. And that's a great question because all of a sudden people realize there's going to be a test. You only have to ask that one time before people start paying attention. I'm doing all the talking here. Tell me what you're hearing. You'll find out a lot of times people aren't even listening. But from that point on, they start to pay attention. Another common mistake. I work with a lot of analytical guys, and they don't ask questions they think they know the answers to. Huge mistake. In other words, you don't ask the questions just to get the information. If you already think you know what's going on, you ask the question in order to get the client or the prospect to verbalize their answer. Because what happens when you ask a question and then they verbalize their answer, that's when people commit more than anything else, more than anything you're ever going to say. What people commit to is what they tell you they want and why they want it. So again, I'll repeat that. It's so simple, and that will double your closing ratio all by itself. Get your client to verbalize what they want and why they want it. It's magic. And then you've got it. You get it in their words. Don't change their words. They'll think you were talking to someone else. I did that when I was young. But and sometimes you don't see people for 2 or 3 weeks before you get back to them, and then you start with, okay, here's what we went over last time. Here's what you said was most important. Here's why you said it's important. Here's some other things you said. Has anything changed? No. And you got them right back to that feeling level, and they go, oh yeah, that's why we're doing this. That's why this is important. That's why we need to take the time to do this. Okay, so it's magical. So getting, the strongest motivation is getting people to verbalize why they want something. I had a guy one time I worked with years ago. He had 60 cases. He was a life insurance guy. He had 60 cases open, and I asked him at one point, as I was getting to know him, I said, "So tell me about one of your cases." Or investment people say, accounts, but it's more. He said, I said, well, tell me what this person wants and why they want it. He couldn't tell me that on anybody. Okay. So anyway, long story short, we closed a lot of business in the next 2 months, just going back out and finding out what that was. Tell me why you want to do this. Tell me what you want to do and why that's important. Obviously, we got back into the conversation, but then we would get people to verbalize that. This literally will double your closing ratio. That simple piece. So try that. You'll like it. And then probably the other question that I do a lot of with people is, does this feel right? We know it makes sense. And I mean, as a closing question, we know it makes sense. Does it feel right? And if anything doesn't feel right about any part of it, let's fix it so it does. I don't do much on closing. It's on my webinar. It's got closing in the title and under the supplemental training. There's a core training on my website, which is $1,000 training. I had a lot of people do that. They love that course. So check that out. It's called the core training. And then the supplemental training is the next button over. That's got a lot of my best webinars on there. And there's one on closing. Because one of my favorite things about closing is if people say, well, I say, well, so does this feel right? They go, well, yeah, feels right. I mean, that basically means a person has bought it. Because the other thing that happens a lot of times is I say, well, are you ready to go ahead with it? Should we start working on the paperwork? And sometimes people say yes, and sometimes they go, well, let us sleep on it. And I usually say, that's okay. I do the same thing, but I just want to make sure that it does feel right. And there's nothing we need to change at this point. And they'll say no. And then the next question is key is, okay, so when do you want to make a decision by? Don't ever give them an option. Let them decide. Because a lot of times they will say, call me tomorrow, call me Friday, much quicker than you think, because they've already decided if it feels right. Some people just want to sleep on it to make sure that it feels the same way tomorrow. If you're more intuitive, that's a good way to go. I used to have my psychologist buddy that I had a business with when I was in my younger days. He used to say, because he was about 15 years my senior, but he used to say, yeah, I'm into intuition. He says, if I get an intuitive hit to do something, he said, I listen to it, but he said, I don't take any action. He says, I wait to see if it comes back. That was his approach. He says, if he gets an intuitive hit twice, he says he takes action. Whereas I'm probably somewhat careful there as well, because you want to make sure intuition is not emotion. Your average guy puts all feelings under emotion. Women are a little better. Women make a little better distinction. A lot of times the guys are just happy to feel something, period. Whereas the women usually are feeling so much it's harder to make a distinction between emotion and intuition. But emotion that's going to get you in trouble is usually going to be based on a negative thought or feeling coming from the ego. So that's an important distinction. Or another way I like to say it is, it may feel good to have another piece of pecan pie, but it won't feel right if you're trying to lose weight. Okay, so there's a difference between feels good and feels right. The feels good is usually more emotional, and that can get you in trouble. Whereas if you're doing what feels right, that's going to work somehow, oftentimes in ways you never would have imagined. That's one of the beauties of it, which of course scares the ego to death. You don't want to be doing anything unknown now. We don't want to be taking any risks. Anything that could backfire. We might become embarrassed, or we might make a mistake, or we might lose money. Oh my God. That's kind of one of my favorite things to talk about is your ego hates mistakes. Doesn't want to make any mistakes. Well, you talk to some of your most successful people or listen to them speak. I mean, that's one thing you hear very commonly is they will say, I've just made more mistakes than anybody. Mistakes are good. I'm not saying you try to make mistakes, but to jump in and take action and learn from your mistakes is the quickest way to learn anything, period. And of course, the ego keeps us from doing that, which becomes a problem. Your ego basically, as one of my favorite authors says, the mantra of the ego, are you ready for this? The mantra of the ego is seek and do not find. All right. All right, so hang on, I got a question here. Check this real quick. Okay. All right, I don't know how to answer that question at the moment. All right, so how are we doing here? That's rule 4, powerful question. I think I've covered that. All right, so 6 books. Oh, yes, I mentioned my book, How to Double Your Sales. I've got 6 books on Amazon. Now, I'll show you those in a second here. Everything goes to Amazon but one. My How to Double Your Sales book, if you want to buy that at sidwalker.com on my, whatever you call it, shopping cart. All the other books I've got on Amazon. Because you can buy the Kindle of Double Your Sales on Amazon. But that's all, and all the rest of my books are on there. If you click on anything that shows those titles, you're going to go to Amazon. And there's audio on the last 2. Let me go. So here's How to Double Your Sales, the one on the left. That's my first book on the right, Trust Your Gut. That's been a very popular book, so I've sold a lot of those too over the years. And then here are my 2 latest books. I've got the #1 book on overcoming call reluctance on Amazon. How I Conquered Call Reluctance. People love that book. Check it out if you haven't read it. It's also on audio. I sell way more. I sell like 8 times more audio than I do books. So check that out. It's on Audible. And then Living in the Zone. That's my latest book. Basically, a lot of what I talked about today. That's more about the ego and taking what I call a spirit-based approach, because that's the most powerful in terms of overcoming call reluctance and fear of self-promotion. Is the more you can blend in what I call a spirit-based approach, the more quickly you can get over any kind of fear, doubt, worry, anxiety, resistance. It's a powerful approach. And I gave you that book. I gave you the PDF. And I often say to people, if you want to get the essence of that, read chapter. It's only 5 chapters. It's 100 pages. Read chapter 4 and 5. And that will give you the meat of it. And the whole book's good, of course, but then you go back and read chapters 1 through 3 if it feels right. How's that? All right. So coaching. Let's see, what have I got here? Coaching options. So obviously, I'm the do-it-yourself guy here. You've got 100 hours of audio on sellingwithoutwrestling.com. That's a lot. All kinds of things there. I mean, that's a complete course. I don't think there's anything that hasn't been covered there in terms of the low-key approach, basically. But that takes time to go through it. And of course, what makes me that's the free approach. And of course, you want more individual attention and you want to speed things up. That's really why you hire a coach. So my process is basically, first of all, identifying anything that doesn't feel right to you. That's huge, because anything that doesn't feel right, you're not doing enough of. In other words, you've got to get everything to feel right in order to make it easier to do, because you're going to resist it. So that's a big deal. And of course, it's usually prospecting and interviewing. Those are my 2 biggest strengths. I'm as good as anybody on the planet at those 2 things. Overcoming any kind of fear or resistance related to prospecting and helping you figure out, what's the best way for you to be prospecting. There's lots of ways to do it. There's no silver bullet on prospecting. I've never seen one anyway. In many years of doing this, as one of my friends says, everything works poorly. All things work, but none of them are anything to write home about. You just need to find the things you can do and then work it. In interviewing, I've helped a lot of people to make a lot of money fine-tune their interviewing process. Again, not to be more controlling, but to be more empowering. To help people get really excited about what the possibilities are. I have people hire me to help profile their clients, especially on big cases. I've helped people close monster cases, hundreds of thousands of dollars of commission. Just by getting to know the people, getting to know the client. What's their dominant buying motive? Because the goal is to get something in front of them they can't say no to. That's very different than trying to talk people into things. When you get something in front of somebody that they can't say no to, that's way more fun. And you make a lot more money. All right. So the first process: identify anything that doesn't feel right, and then we got to change that, and that can take some time. A lot of you have a lot of things that don't feel right, and then if you interviewed 100 of my clients, which obviously nobody's going to do that, but just for the sake of I know thousands of people that I've worked with, obviously, but if I were to ask 100 of people, what was the biggest thing they got out of working with me, most people would say the confidence to be your authentic self. That's huge, and there's a lot to that. The confidence to be your authentic self, just to be yourself. I can say to people, well, just be yourself. You've had people tell you that. The problem is, what's that? If you're listening to your ego, it's got a whole litany of things that it can tell you. If you're being intuitive, it's very different. So anyway, that's how I've gotten people from 100,000 to over $1 million a year. That's what creates the $1 million a year income producers, and with holistic success. In other words, holistic means your health is good, your relationships are good, and your money's working for you. Because if anything's, if you're using a more negative approach, there's going to be holes in your health, your relationships, and your money. That's where the negativity is going to show up. So ideally, you want a holistic success here. Because you all know people like that. They make tons of money, but they're miserable. Their health's a wreck, and their kids won't talk to them. You don't want to be one of those guys. All right. Another way to say it is you want to learn to be less analytical and stop trying to figure everything out. You want to be more intuitive. You want to go and move towards what feels right, move away from what doesn't. It's that simple. It's that fast. But that takes some practice. And I got to do a sales job on people to get them to do it, to get them to start trusting their instincts more. But I'm good at that. I've been doing that for a long time. I can make it very logical for the most analytical people to become more intuitive, and I've done it. I've had clients for a long time that started out really analytical, and they laugh. They're not that way anymore. They can still do the analytical because it's a tremendous skill they have, but that's not how they're making decisions. And in my own case, I struggled for years when I was younger. I tried to do everything perfectly. I was being a good ego, using my intellect, and tried to do everything just right. And I had my failures. And at one point, I've always been good in sports. Played a lot of hockey when I was younger. Grew up on the Canadian border, north of Detroit, and finally one day I realized, why am I struggling with business? And why am I so good in sports and struggling in business? Or why don't I enjoy this more? Why am I working so hard to make such a little amount of money? And I finally decided, well, I'm just going to do this business the way I do sports, because money changes everything. When you add money, all of a sudden your ego wants you to be careful and do everything right and don't make any mistakes, and that becomes a nightmare. Whereas everything got better when I started doing things like I did sports, which is just go out and have fun, just go wing it. In fact, that's one of my favorite things. Is there was a guy years ago that a psychiatrist that was very successful, and somebody said, "How did you get to be so good?" And he said, he thought it for a couple of seconds. He said, "There's one thing I learned years ago," and he said, "It's made all the difference." He said, "I basically learn everything that I think is of value, and then I wing it." So I'm big on that. There's everybody's out there trying to teach you a system. Systems are okay, and there's good parts to systems, but you don't want the system to be more important than your intuition, especially when you're with people. They can feel that. Like I said, systems can have good parts, but don't ever fall in love with the system. You want to stay intuitive. All right. All right. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, let's doesn't cost anything to talk for a half hour to get to know each other a little bit. See if we might be a good match for a coaching project. Let's call it. And I do a lot of shorter projects. It's not a major commitment necessarily. Because I'm intuitive, I move a lot faster than most coaches. I can get people making money in record time, or making more money usually. Everybody's making money, but it's how can we make more? All right. So I think I'm coming up on an hour. Let me see if there's anything else here. Let me go to my last slide. So take a screenshot of that. That's contact information. Remember, I said if you want How to Double Your Sales, that book, get that on sidwalker.com. That's the only one. The rest of them will take you to Amazon. Selling Without Wrestling, download the handouts if you haven't done that. I'll leave this on for a couple minutes after we wind up. And then there's my phone number, there's my email, there's my calendar link. If you want to talk, send me your email, and I'll send you my calendar link. Or there it is there. That'll show you my schedule. So I just tell people either send me an email and I'll confirm it, or you can book an appointment with that calendar link. They're booked usually for hour appointments, so we probably won't go an hour, but don't let that bother you. Usually talk for at least a half hour. All right. Well, I think I'm going to be a champion here and do what I said, which is end at exactly an hour. How's that? So anyway, this has been great. We had a good crowd here. I see some familiar faces and lots of new ones. So glad you could make it, and hopefully you got something you can go out and try today. And if something works, let me know. That's always one good to hear about. So anyway, I thank you all for taking the time to be on today. We'll do this again soon, and bye for now. All right, see ya.